Stalker, protect the world from the zone. Join duty.
Like putting on a damn torn, stinky, and itchy, unwashed shirt. The Stalker is kind of a game that draws you in with the ugliness and sheer feel of desperation and depression. Perfect for a good Spooktober game. Well then, don your Adidas tracksuit with no less than 2 stripes. Pick a salted pickle, get a bottle of vodka, and light up a cigaretto. Stalker takes place in the mythical magical wonderland that is known as the modern-day Chernobyl exclusion zone, where radiation and some other mythical force had transformed wildlife and your average gopniks into superpowered and twisted radioactive monstrosities, much like your average anti-vaxxer, except for the radioactivity. You, a nameless stalker, gets shit out of a truck one stormy night, presumably after doing the impossible, and overdosing on an attempt to smoke a whole bottle of vodka. Now you awake in a bunker-like basement, ready to face the past. And like your typical Zarazny game protagonist, you have amnesia, incredible lust for stealing anything that's not nailed down, and all that you know is that you must kill. As you ascend the steps of the basement, you slowly notice that the world Stalker depicts gets darker and gloomier, almost oppressive in its brutality and rawness. On every step you take, you wonder if it wouldn't have been easier to just stay at home, stay safe, away from the darkness, monsters, and existential dread of this place. However, you're propelled forward by curiosity as you pile on more and more dead bodies of both your fellow man as well as the corrupted abominations that roam the lands, just so you could reach the fabled center, the remains of Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and the wish granter inside. So what in the grand pizdzets is Stalker? Well, in game journalist terms, it's a simple open world-like FPS game with RPG elements from 2007, developed by GSC Game World, an Ukrainian developer, and I suppose we could start there. Being a nitpicky Latvian asshole, I'm familiar with the proper BLYAT etiquette. So I'll then run down the list of the bad things about the game, faster than the fashion model with diarrhea on the runway attempting not to explode on the onlookers. Since Stalker is a first-person shooter, we might as well begin with that. Well, the gun mechanics are fucked. The game's progression is based on the weapon damage and, more importantly, their accuracy. Anything you get in the first part of the game might as well be like trying to piss with a boner. Accuracy is out the window. Then we have the graphics, which on the first glance, even from 2007, resemble the texture of Borscht. But most damningly, the same year Crysis released as this game, and 3 years earlier, Half-Life 2. So when I say Stalker visually is great, it's definitely not because of the immediate visuals. And then we have animations. Oh my god!
And I'm not going to pretend I did it to win favors upstairs. You do some job.
Then we have NPC AIs, while at times feeling more capable than modern AIs, can at some point just simply decide and commit the big pizdzets and either walk right into the anomaly and die, or worse, get stuck. Then, while the game also has the faction system, it also feels like a cut-down feature. The game as a whole is as bug-riddled as the beds everyone's sleeping on, but worst of all, your character moves like a complete alcoholic. Supersonic sprinting speeds until you encounter an obstacle. Overall, the game really feels partially like an amalgamation of cut-down features, and there is so much more wrong with this game. Yet, no matter how much critique I may lay down for it, I fucking love it! And proclaim it one of the best shooters out there. It's a cult hit in the things that it does right. Oh yeah, it does so very well. I'll try to explain this as if you're the most sheltered American possible, and considering that about 33% of you watching right now possibly are, that's probably a good way to go. Every single one of us have this morbid curiosity about natural, or better yet, man-made disasters. I mean, look at what hard-ons are still around for the fucking world wars. Regardless, Chernobyl disaster in '86 was unprecedented to this day, the absolute largest nuclear disaster. And to this day, there is still 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the power plant. It's one of those unique areas that urban explorers crave to see. Because this part of the world is closed off, not because of some secrecy, but because of the sheer threat to your own life, it spawns far more intrigue than, say, Area 51. The ghost town that was created almost overnight now is left for nature to reclaim, and in real life is the closest thing to a true post-apocalyptic landscape we will get. Developers of the game had put in an incredible amount of time and effort modeling key landmarks from the place. And as a kid, for that unique ability to go, look at and interact with the zone was such a treat. Environment of the game at every step both screams abandoned, dilapidated, rusting and rotting place, while on the other hand, the random characters you meet on occasion inhabiting these now derelict buildings or roaming wildlife, making noises everywhere, show that despite having been abandoned, this place is still full of life. The zone in of itself acts like a zombie, half dead and rotting, but still moving and alive. The word often many game publishers and industry idiots tend to use to describe their yearly toilet disasters is with immersion. Our game is so immersive. The immersion your character gets when the immersion that and immersion this. The immersion! Well, пошел ты, ебаный шлюхи, блядь! Вот и, блин, Stalker reaches the level of atmospheric.
Только шашлык приготовится, так мы и сядем.
Класс!
Посмешнее нет ничего в
Почему
запасе.
среди сталкеров совсем нету женщин? Это ж только представить. Амазонки.
Now let me explain. In my book of great games, the level of immersion and immersive gameplay is not easy to reach. However, a step above that are games that manage to become atmospheric. These are the games that not only make you feel like the character you're playing, but also brings out the environment in such a detail and uniqueness that you can almost taste it. Stalker, thanks to the real-world environment, already has that eerie feel. However, if you listen in, every map and level has a different soundtrack that brings out the feeling for it. Then you have these incredibly unsettling sounds of distant gunfire, screaming, people or monsters creaking buildings and more. And all of that compounded by a full day-night cycle with changing weather. For a game from 2007, it really makes it feel real and alive. In a true Slav nature, a good squat is important, and the random characters around a good pile of burning unsold Clear Sky CDs, telling jokes in Russian, playing guitar, or simply chatting with notable sad tone makes for a great, depressing feeling. Everything screams atmosphere in Stalker. A downtrodden reality that was part of USSR, and like a city of Pripyat and everything around in Chernobyl, all of it is almost frozen in time. Even today, Stalker, despite its outlandish idea of anomalies and radioactive magic, is a game that makes it so believable, and while it is scary and incredibly unsettling, it's also very welcoming and intriguing. Unlike many horror-type games, Stalker oddly doesn't feel the need to resort to cheap tricks like jump scares. In fact, the game actually is a proper horror. The atmosphere is there and the slow build-up too. The first underground complex is a great example of it alone. After fighting off some bandits in the zone, you come to a big gunfight between the Free Stalkers and military. This is more of an action-based start. Afterwards, a character you saved tells you about some information for your lore stuff or plot in the underground complex. So, like a misfortunate gerbil being launched into a dark, smelly hole, you squat down and find yourself in darkness with just your flashlight and some kind of slurpy juice illuminating the place. You kill a few bandits, and aside from great creepy sound design, you don't find too much out of place. At no point the game feels the need to constantly attempt to startle you by throwing garbage off the shelves or blasting ass gas into your face when you reach the optimal jump scare moment. No, Stalker takes time to build and build and build until you reach a point in your underground exploration when suddenly you hear something heavy breathing and rushing towards you. You suddenly spot a glimpse of something moving towards you, and before you know it, you are face to face with a bipedal piss-shitting leech monster that's ready to suck out the living blood out of you. Okay, once you finish killing both of the fuckers, you get a little bit of story item and a little cutscene to cool off. As you try to find your way out, now you're met with incoming military meatbags. This cool-off slog period is also perfect to refresh your senses after the traumatizing experience of bloodsuckers. As you near the exit and you think you're safe, die, Flint, die, Zarosa! This one underground complex idea is extended throughout the whole game in many forms. The horror is constant dread, the build-up of it, and at every step, Stalker succeeds. Well, except the later underground complex is notably lacking pacing and development, but we'll get to that point. Point is, when it comes to horror, oh fuck me, this game is still scary, so get your spooky, scary shivers going. However, I never actually liked the scary stuff that much. In fact, when I played for the first time that first complex, I actually had to have a friend next to me to keep me company. You see, the game tickled me in a slightly different way. The gameplay. Now, unlike all the other shooters at that time, there really were no other proper open world type games, in the first person category at least. Stalker, in retrospect, attempted a lot of unique or rare features. For example, aiming down the sights of the gun at the time was just getting popularized by both Crysis and Call of Duty Modern Warfare as well, coming out in the same year. Bullets also actually are bullets, not just some sort of Slav-based teleportation hocus blin pocus. On guns like VSS, the bullet drop was incredibly important. Then there were also the weapons themselves. Stalker in fact is responsible for making me fall in love with this incredibly weird, unique FN2000 that only can be picked up at the end of the game. Or my second favorite, SPAS-12, or as it's known here, SPSA-12, for obvious legal Zybis reasons. However, some of the things did frustrate me even today, and one of those was actually accuracy. Now, unlike all the other RPG games out there, progression in this game came in the form of more accurate and longer range weapons and more durable armor, which actually is far more rewarding and interesting than power creep leveling systems. A weird aspect of Stalker also came in the form of weapon attachments, or at least an early form of something like it, unlike its Call of Duty or Crysis counterparts. There were a few scattered around, a very few and far between, but finding them often was more thrilling than getting a new gun itself, especially when it was a grenade launcher. Then there were also unique upgraded weapons, which sometimes sported either a different caliber of ammunition or a slightly different build or stats or whatnot else, compared to the normal counterparts, making them rather covetable for just the sheer uniqueness. However, it was ruined by the shit king of Blin that was the durability. See, to survive the zone, your dumbass needs to at least have a lead pan strapped to your ass, but even that lead pan will disintegrate after getting shot too much. Even if you found those good items, you dreaded using them because once they degrade, they're next to useless. Guns start jamming too much and suits lose protection. Problem is, there is no repairing. And considering that when weapons are dropped on the ground, they still can receive damage too when you shoot them or explode them. So often you didn't even use grenades for the fear of losing that potential good weapon. On the bright side, within that list of unique features that Stalker featured, one of them was multiple ammo types for all the weapons. Also, the weapons you pick up from the ground can sometimes be loaded, meaning that if you unload them, you get a little bit of more ammunition out of them potentially. All of these were little details that actually mattered far more than you may think, and in the way made Stalker far more realistic military shooter than Call of Duty or any other out there. And to this day, really only Escape from Tarkov has this feature and beats it in that sort of a sense. And yet, to pile on the problems that you needed to deal with, inventory system was based on weight, limiting your kleptomaniac desires, which brought in the survival aspect for the game. Most of your enemies are tough and would kill you no problem, so you needed to pick enough armor to save yourself, accurate weapons to hit anything, and ammo to actually shoot in the first place, because that did weigh too. You also had to balance enough free space so that you could bring back something to sell and survive the next day. It crafted this neat, almost hardcore-like balancing act. Well, until you realize that dead bodies don't really weigh anything, no matter how much you put in them, so you could use them as some sort of a ghetto shopping trolley. Die, blin Patsani, he's sleeping, okay? Just dragging him back home, okay? AI, on the other hand, well, at times feels like literally eating dirt, sniffing glue, or sniffing each other's assholes. And I'm not just talking about the wild sukas bled. Yet at other times, AI knows what you're doing and outflanks you when you least expect it. Still, it's pretty annoying that as soon as you touch one of the NPCs with a bullet, and no one's around to hear it or see it, everyone suddenly both knows exactly where you're at all times, and that you're hostile. Still, it's a mid-2000 artificial блядь intelligence, so I can forgive at least some sins. On each new load of a save, and you'll be doing a lot of it, and thank fuck for the quick saves, AI will act quite differently, providing unique engagements every time. Still, it's weird. It's a general mixture of true ahead-of-its-time brilliance and behind-the-times nuclear retardation. Like, for example, wild dog packs. They will disengage when most are killed. AI is running from grenades like their lives depended on it, and more importantly, roaming stalkers and wildlife making the game feel alive. I still don't know how to call it, really. Maybe AI is some sort of level of savant, perhaps. As for the story, blah. To this day I can say I don't care. Still, the themes of the game come from the books like Roadside Picnic and equally named Stalker movie, before the 86 disaster, funnily enough, but developers have put their own spin onto things, and in process of doing it, I dare to say created a subgenre of sorts for Slav games. The Cheeki Breeki radiation disaster post-apocalyptic shooter blin. Still, Stalker's premise is that you, an amnesiac, go out in the world to find s.t.a.l.k.e.r and kill him. As you follow a trail of clues, you find and uncover information about the zone and the things that happened in it, essentially. Why mutants and those anomalies started appearing. All of it points to the nuclear power plant at the center of the zone, where not only you, but even your friend's babushka is running towards, either after answers or riches, or nuclear-grade compote. For me though, it always was about a familiar depressing and shit mood that engulfed me like a wet, smelly blanket with poo stains and blood on it, not the destination. Especially because the destination, despite its uniqueness, is really rushed and not well presented. See, this is where we need to talk about the development issues of Stalker. And despite having total of 7 endings of the game itself was supposed to be quite a lot larger. As many grand stories, Stalker's development was riddled with issues. Originally presented, or at least talked about, in year 2000, Stalker was slated to be released in 2003. But it missed its deadline, and as the years piled on, it was even mentioned as a vaporware game. After the publisher THQ put pressure on the project, bringing in Dean Sharp to oversee the cut-down scope of the game, they did actually push it out into the world by the year 2007. It's worth mentioning that Dean, with some GSC colleagues, would go on to start A4 Studios, which made Metro of all black fucking games. Still, what was the original Stalker's plan? Well, like many games, it was too grand and too bloated. In fact, the pre-alpha version of the game was leaked back in 2003 or so, and is still available online in, you guessed it, Russian sharing sites and the like. Later down the line, GSC themselves released an old build of the engine dating back to 2004, with different physics and working A-Life system, more monsters and so on. Overall, it's clear that the game, without cutting it down, would have not seen the light of the day, but weirder part is, even knowing this, the fact that repairing probably was part of the game, the fact that your character's sprint speed rivals Sonic because cars were supposed to be originally part of the design, all of it still in this version, this released version of Shadow of Chernobyl, loses none of its greatness. It's still incredibly atmospheric and beautiful. But what if I told you, you no longer need to compromise either? You see, the community modding support and the love for the game is incredible, as it is always with cult games. So, there is no wonder that there are mods that would enhance or improve the base game that exists. Yet, it gets even better. Years after releases, or shall we say that leak of the pre-alpha, modders have painstakingly recreated original intent for the Stalker, bringing back many of the original monsters, designs, missions, weapons, and even cars and maps. The Lost Alpha is currently on ModDB and is free to play. I'm currently playing through it myself, and the maps as well as the missions that in Shadow of Chernobyl that quite didn't feel right. In this one, the Lost Alpha actually make more sense. Instead of going and shooting everything, the mission actually tells you to go and do the exact opposite. Try to talk over or first infiltrate the compound. However, Shadow of Chernobyl still remains a very unique experience, and I would wholeheartedly recommend playing through that before picking up the Lost Alpha, because then you get to enjoy two similar games that end up increasingly different. In the end, it's hard for me not to gush about how great Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl is. In fact, all the Stalker games are. Now, sure, I remember when Clear Sky came out and it was played with performance issues galore for months and months, eventually coming to a very average result, but it still had the same atmospheric vibe. And then how Pripyat released with silent reception after the Clear Sky's poor performance and result was surprisingly good, yet it somehow still lacked the punchiness of the first game. For all of its faults, the inevitable comparisons to Fallout series always arise, which kind of is funny to me. And sure, I liked Fallout 3 well enough. When it came out a year after Chernobyl, it always felt like a kid's toy version of what Stalker managed. Maybe that's why the West seems to be so much more in love with this kiddie version of a radioactive post-apocalyptic survival game. For me, Stalker always excelled because the world not only felt real due to attention to the details in the right places, but also that it kind of was real, somber, without a fake dress-up or makeup, raw, brutal, depressing and dark. Or perhaps it is my inner Latvian speaking that tolerates the cutesy stuff, but in reality loves to wallow in suffering that makes Stalker such a comfy and cozy horror misery pillow.
Stalker, protect the world from the zone. Join duty.